Welcome to DreamMachine. My name is Arun.
And my name is Patricia.
And for this one, we're going to Shrek number 3. So,
I used to look forward to when we were discussing about Shrek. I really loved our talk on the first one, and I really loved our talk on the second one, but can we not do this? Can we just look back on Shrek 2 again?
come on, Trisha, be brave. Like, you know, it's the...
No. You are not giving me a brave pun in this. No.
No, but I'm just saying, like, you know, it's the third one. It's like, surely they didn't make any more, right?
You're mistaken, Aaron.
Okay, well, let's just get this one out of the way and let's hope that's the end of it. Here we go.
Yeah, here we go.
So Shrek the Third is the 2007 DreamWorks animated film and the third film of the Shrek franchise. Following Shrek and Shrek 2, it was produced by DreamWorks Animation and distributed by Paramount Pictures and released in US theaters on May the 18th of 2007. It was produced as a working title of Shrek 3 by the name of changed to avoid the potential confusion with Shrek 3D. Mind you, I'm surprised no one can notice that D and no D. But just like the first two Shrek films, the movie is significantly based on the fairy tale themes. The film was rated PG by the MPAA for some crude humor, suggestive context, and swashbuckling action. It was nominated for a Best Movie Award from the Nickelodeon Kids' Choice Awards in 2008, which shows that not every award system is foolproof. So
trust me, Nickelodeon Kids' Choice Awards, I sometimes question about, why would you nominate this when there are so many better ones that you could have chosen?
Yeah, that's why we call it. Every time, that's the thing on the Arrow Meta show. Every time we do a Nickelodeon Kids' Choice Awards, why do we always call it none of the above? Like, because that's kind of what we end up with. Really.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, basically, there's not really much to discuss about when it comes to behind-the-scenes stories, except that they changed pretty much a lot of things in terms of, the production of Shrek. Like, the director is different, the producer, I believe, was the same, but I think it was only in the first film. The writers are completely different. Like, in the first two movies, they had Joe Stillman as one of the co-writers, and Joe Stillman, I mentioned this before, he was a writer on Pete and Pete, and he would be a story editor for various cartoons and other TV shows. He's not in this, and also neither is the geniuses of David J. Stem and his other cohorts who I've mentioned, or David and Weiss, that's what it is, that I mentioned before in Shrek 2, in which they wrote All Dogs Go to Heaven. They wrote the amazing episodes of Rugrats from Hanukkah to Mother's Day. They're not in this either. They actually did bring in a bunch of other people from this movie that, they were pretty decent, but nothing compared to what was in Shrek the Third. But you may know these writers, Jeffrey Price and Peter Seaman. They've, worked on movies and TV shows from Tales from the Crypt, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, Wild Wild West, the 2000 Grinch movie. And of course, believe it or not, Chris Miller. Yeah, before working on Happy Feet, he worked on Shrek the Third. And I don't know about you, but this is definitely when the Shrek series started to become very lackluster.
Yeah, it's I've always kind of made it a kind of a rule, like, if we've got to 3 and we still aren't seeing any further shine of this franchise, then I think you should stop at 3. I think, and that's how I felt about, Halo 3, Gears of War 3, like X-Men 3, like, any 3 that we get to is like, guys, come on, we've had 3 films, let's just kind of like, nip it in the bud. But no, there's money to be made, so...
oh my god, let me just tell you about something. I remember when the advertisement of this movie was so huge. Like, I'm not even joking that there was advertisement, there was commercials, there were toys everywhere. I remember seeing, like, a whole bunch of stuff on Walmart, like Shrek paper towels and Shrek toys and, Shrek cereal, Shrek everything. There was so much advertisement for Shrek the Third, it wasn't even funny. Tim and Eric from the TV show Tim and Eric Awesome Show, great job. Were so fed up with the advertisement that they decided to kind of like do an ironic joke where they would like paint themselves in green and then they would promote Shrek the Third. And yeah, this movie was hyped up to be huge.
Yeah,
They were going to be adding in.
I think part of it as well was that I think a lot of people thought, and I think businesses even who were also manufacturing the toys as well, thought that this was going to be the last ever Shrek, phenomenon. They didn't think, Shrek was going to get. They thought that the third movie was the final movie, and there wasn't going to be any more Shrek.
Yeah, exactly. And then it was revealed by Jeffrey Katzenberg, no, we are going to be releasing more Shrek movies. We're going to be releasing a fourth movie, and we're going to be releasing a fifth movie where it's going to be a prequel, where you're going to see about what Shrek was doing before he went to the swamp.
Oh, joy. But anyway, let's go back to Shrek the Third. So, story. So, the king dies, and...
Oh my god. No, we need to talk about this, first of all. I'm sorry. I really want to talk about this. Okay, so before we get to basically the movie takes place right after Shrek 2. So the king is sick, and Shrek and Fiona are basically taking over his royal duties, and Shrek is not doing a very good job, which is not surprising. And then Fiona tries to give off a little clue that, when we get back to the swamp, there's going to be possibly some more. There's going to be maybe a possible pitter patter of little feet. And then Shrek is like, oh, yes, that's right. The swamp rats. He's like, no, something a little bit bigger. Then she kind of like tries to hint that she's pregnant. But then Shrek is like, no, you're my only family, Fiona. Then we have the announcement about like the king is dying. And it starts off like really, really sad, but then it just kind of like switches back and forth in which he dies and then he's not dead and then he dies and then he's not dead. And then he kind of reveals that, if you don't want to be king, then there is a possible other heir, and that would be Arthur Pendragon, who would eventually become King Arthur, but we'll discuss about that later. Mm-hmm. And so he dies, and then you have this ceremony where, everybody's being gathered around. They have the Beatles song, and you have him buried in, he's like in a Foot Locker box.
Can I just, that whole, live and let die, that just took me completely out of the moment. Absolutely out of the moment.
Same here.
Because, keep this in mind. Live and Let Die was a James Bond theme. Live and Let Die was covered by Guns N' Roses. Come on, guys. You couldn't find a more, you couldn't get the orchestra to play up the fact that he was dead. Like, he was a major character. He was a kind of a main character in the second film. And and he had a pretty big plot point at that as well. I mean, that's the way he goes out. Come on.
Oh man, it was such a whiplash of tonal shifts. Like, he's dying, then he starts coming back to life, and then it's supposed to be funny, and then he just dies, and then it's supposed to be like really sad. And I would have liked to have seen Fiona's feelings about her dad dying, because she's just starting to get to know him again, and they had this really nice relationship in Shrek 2 where she's trying to convince him that Shrek is a good ogre and that he's not a brutish monster that he thought he was going to be.
Sorry, Patricia, forgive me. How much time has passed between Shrek 2 and Shrek 3?
I don't know, actually, because it looked like it took place like right after, because they were still in Far, Far Away, but I guess not. I don't really know. It doesn't really state on that. I mean, they were just getting back to their honeymoon in Shrek 2, and then all of a sudden Fiona's pregnant. I mean, I know that takes like at least a couple of weeks, for somebody to get pregnant after a honeymoon. But I would assume that it doesn't really become clear.
It's kind of strange. Like, I really hope it's not like, in the between the Muppet movies, between the Muppets and Muppets Most Wanted, where it's basically just taking straight after the first one. Like, I'm really hoping it's not that deal.
Oh no, I really hope not. But if it does take place like immediately afterwards, it's like, wow, you went from them going to their honeymoon and the king giving his blessings to the king dying. It's like that is I'm sorry, and trust me, we're going to be discussing about the crazy tonal shifts in this movie, because there are so many of them. It's just so unbelievable. But yeah, I mean, let's just continue.
Yeah. I mean, so those were main things that happened, and then also we get to be introduced to Arthur. And Arthur, I can't remember much about this movie at all. Like,
Yeah.
it's just, he starts off as like, your typical total high school loser, pretty much, and
Which is pretty stereotypical. I mean, they've done the loser Arthur character in Sword of the Stone, in which, he was named Wart, and he was kind of like the servant to his foster father and brother. And then Merlin comes along and tries to teach him the ways of becoming a good king. So I guess they're trying to do that, but you have, this total loser where, and then they go to high school, and they have all these like high school jokes in which like Shrek thinks that the tough the tough kid is actually Arthur, but it turns out to be Sir Lancelot, which in the King Arthur tale, Sir Lancelot was King Arthur's most valuable knight. So you're trying to tell me that in the beginning he was a bully to Arthur? Man, that's going to be ironic when Arthur hires him to be as his best knight in the lore.
Yeah, you know what? I just thought of. This movie is supposed to be. Shrek was founded upon the premise of being anti-Disney. And now,
Yes.
as you can see, going into the third film, it's trying to kind of like discover its own personality, and you find that it's actually not someone you found very interesting to begin with. Like, it's kind of like when you have that friend who makes you meet for the first time, and he actually makes some really funny jokes and makes a really good first impression, and then finally you kind of like get to kind of know him a little bit better. Then you find he's not actually the kind of guy you thought he was, and you actually find him kind of a bit disappointing.
Yeah, I think I have another analogy that I think I remember when I don't remember for what movie, but it's kind of like similar to yours. So it's like that friend that you knew back in high school that you used to be best friends, you used to hang out together all the time, and he was so funny, he was so likable, and then you separate, and then maybe like 10 years later you meet up in your high school reunion. He's still acting the same way, but you kind of grew up, and now you just look at each other with awkwardness and you don't really know what to say.
Well, it's not even that. It's kind of like he's not even being as funny as he was before. Like he was.
No,
just
he's just
kinda
no,
like, yeah.
he's using like he's trying to update himself with using like, jokes to make himself look funny, but it just feels kind of stale.
Yeah. So
And it's really disappointing too, because Shrek 2 really upped the ante when it came to comedy and very sincere moments, and then just seeing this, it just feels like a massive letdown.
well,
And
Shrek 2 has something very strong going for it, and that was that we'd never really seen what happened after Far, Far Away. Like, okay, there's the Disney sequels, but like they were trash. But I mean, Shrek 2 had a lot of area to kind of like to explore, like what happens in this idea of Far, Far Away. Also on top of that as well, like now that the unorthodox ending of Shrek, this fairy tale, like this anti-fairy tale, if you will, has now happened. What would have happened? What's happened with the actual story, and that's when Prince Charming came in, and then all the shenanigans happened.
oh yeah, that's right. Prince Charming is our villain, everybody.
Yeah, and he's not very strong, to say.
No,
to
not
say the
even
least.
close. To be fair, he was never really strong in the second movie. It was the fairy godmother who was the most memorable
Well,
character.
Prince Charming was more kind of he was kind of more. I'm trying to find a good way to describe it. Imagine, the Emperor's New Groove, and he was a not very good version of like who's the big muscly guy in that.
Oh, you mean Pacha?
Apache? Yeah, he's sort of kind of like a watered down version of him in a way, except he doesn't.
Oh
do
wait,
the
are you
flip.
are you talking about which big character are you talking about? Are you talking about the side character to the llama, or are you talking about the villain side character?
The villain side character?
Oh, okay, then you're talking about Kronk.
Kronk, yeah.
Because
so-
because Pacha is also this big character who also was played by John Goodman, which we'll discuss about next week. Please kill us.
Okay.
But no, but Kronk, yeah, is played by Patrick Warp. Oh God.
There's too many consistencies here.
Help. Okay, but I get what you're saying. So basically, he's like a watered down version of Kronk, in which he's supposed to be like this very funny character to offset the goof, the villainous of Yzma.
Yeah.
And yeah, I can kind of see what you're coming from in terms of what the character is.
Yeah, like he's basically Kronk in this, and obviously the fairy godmother's like the main villain of the whole thing, and obviously now she's out of the picture, and so now it's kind of gone to it's kind of like the I guess the other analogy I could say it's kind of like Starscream taking taking over the Decepticons after Megatron's, gone. Like, and then,
yeah.
Except in this one, we don't get like the fairy godmother version of Galvatron. So it's like,
sure, I can see that. So so basically Prince Charming, where he's living at, is he's constantly performing, his heroic deeds of taking down Shrek and saving the princess. And it looks like dinner theater, and everybody's booing at him. Mm-hmm. And so he's living this miserable life, and he wants to take revenge on Shrek. And what he does is that, I'm not even joking, they kind of like take a page from Happily Never After, in which he goes over to the villains of the fairy tales and he talks about, where's our happily ever after? Why do we have to be the ones who don't get the happy ending where everybody else does? It's like, ugly stepsister. Why couldn't you fit your foot into the slipper and Cinderella got to live in the palace eating bonbons? Or Rumpelstiltskin, what about you? You wanted a baby. And don't worry, we'll get to Rumpelstiltskin much later on. And, Captain Hook, the same thing with Peter Pan. And so everybody decides to like form this group where they're going to go over to far, far away, take it down, and they're going to find their happily ever after. Well, Prince Charming is going to perform this huge play where he wants to capture Shrek and defeat him on stage so everybody can watch him.
Yeah. By the way, I mean, obviously, I know we're going to voices later, but one of the people, the ugly stepsister, in America, the Doris is voiced by Larry King, but in the UK, he's voiced by Jonathan Ross.
Oh, really? I had no idea that they changed voice actors for this.
Yeah, that was the first. Is that the first aspect of regionalization we've actually seen from DreamWorks?
I have no idea.
Because
maybe it could be. I personally did not know this.
Because we're in the Pixar films, they've been doing it since Monsters Inc. Regionalizing.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, like,
right.
so, but this is the first time that I think I've actually come across something like that. Because keep in mind, Julie Andrews still voices Queen Lillian and things, and so they never changed.
She does.
Yeah, she does. So in that, but obviously they get the whole. Mind you, there's one thing I want to ask about that before we move on. Never Ever After. When did that come out the same time as Shrek the Third, or was that?
I think it came out a few years before. Because I remember when after Shrek and Shrek 2 came out, I remember that there was just so many there were so many ripoffs of Shrek. Okay, I'm gonna look it up, and wow, yeah, Happily Never After came out. Let's see. Shrek the Third came out in May, so Happily Never After came out in January. So it came out, Happily Never After came out a few months before Shrek the Third.
So I don't think you had enough time to kind of like rip off, Happily Never After. I don't think.
I don't know. I mean, maybe they kind of heard from it because Happily Never After was done by Lionsgate. And I think I remember that not only Happily Never After, but Hoodwinked also tried to rip off the Shrek franchise with gathering up a whole bunch of characters and, try to be like a sassy version of fairy tales. And Patrick Warburton is the wolf. Oh.
It's not letting up, is it?
Okay. I'm sorry. Okay, but yeah, there were a lot of. I wouldn't be surprised. I know it's a bit of a coincidence that Happily Never After and Shrek the Third has villains that want to find their happily ever after, and I don't know, but I just find it to be way too much of a coincidence. But let's get back to Shrek. So Shrek starts leaving to the high school. And he hears from Fiona right before, they go away on the boat, saying that, hey, Shrek, guess what? You're going to be a father. And then, he was like, what? Oh, that's great news. And he basically is very concerned about being a father because, he hears about... he knows about the history of like ogres being, fathers, and he doesn't want the same thing happen to the kids. He doesn't want to make their lives miserable, which actually kind of contradicts the first movie. You remember how in the first movie, Shrek was talking to Donkey about like, sometimes you can't see what is actually in front of you and, trying to break away from what we perceived as ogres to be. They're not just monsters. Shrek actually did have a bit of contradiction to how he was, portrayed by human beings, and he was trying to break away from that, or he was trying to hide it. So the fact that he's afraid of being a father because he wouldn't be good to the kids, it just doesn't kind of work, because he's trying to break away from the stereotypes of what ogres were when he was talking to Donkey, that, hey, just because I'm an ogre doesn't mean I'm a bad character. And yeah, now we have a sense in which, now he's going to be a bad father. It's like, no, he's not. He's going to be perfectly fine. I take it that because there were different writers, that they basically just kind of missed the point of the original.
Okay. So I think, I just completely lost my trace of thought there.
Okay, I guess we can go back to Arthur, which...
Yeah.
Arthur is played by Justin Timberlake from NSYNC, and it's kind of ironic that would be the case, because he and Cameron Diaz, who voices as Fiona, they were dating at the time.
Yeah, and there's the thing about this, though. Justin Timberlake, I think, was trying to get his start, I think, into, doing, movies and things like that. And to be honest, he really surprised me in The Social Network, where, the Mark Zuckerberg film about Facebook. That's probably my favorite performance of Justin Timberlake.
Sure. I think, this was this like one of his first roles, that, he kind of like tried to start with, after his singing career.
I believe it was, yeah.
So I guess it wasn't like there, because, personally for me, I thought he did a pretty decent job as voicing Boo Boo in the Yogi Bear movie, despite that being a train wreck.
Yeah.
But, he does kind of like sound like the character from the cartoon.
Good grief. He was in The Love Guru as well.
Oh, it's there's like a conspiracy going on. First John Goodman, then Patrick Warburton, and now Mike Myers and Justin Timberlake in a movie. It's like the universe is going after us.
Should have stayed in the Mickey Mouse Club. Oh, well.
Okay. Breaking aside from that. So, I would have liked if, Arthur was a bit of a stronger character. I get what they were trying to do. They were trying to make him like a weak character because, it's very similar to like in Sword of the Stone, in which, he started off as a weak character and then he became strong enough to be king. But he is so boring and so uninteresting.
Yeah, this is the thing. A lot of this movie is just a load of uninteresting average. Just going through some of the story, this should have been quite epic when you think about it. Here's all the bad guys ganging up to take over Far, Far Away and get their happy ending. And, you just see the whole thing play out, and then it's, then it's the princesses having to fend for themselves, pretty much.
Yeah.
And with Princess Fiona leading the charge, which obviously makes sense,
Sure, it does make sense, because the other princesses, they're sticking to their, damsel in distress stereotypes.
Mm-hmm.
Which, I guess it kind of makes sense because, we have Snow White, we have Rapunzel, we have Cinderella, we have Sleeping Beauty, and every single one of them in the fairy tales were saved by the prince. There was no, princess at that point that kind of like saved herself. So Fiona was like, no, we can save ourselves. We need to work together so we can take down these villains. And another character that we need to talk about is Doris. You know how when Prince Charming was at the bar and he was talking to them about you need to break away from your villainous ways and you have to try to find your happily ever after. So what about Doris? Doris was an ugly stepsister for Cinderella, and she's with Princess Fiona and the other princesses. She's supposed to be the villain, yet at the same time she's with them like if they were besties. Mm-hmm. So what's the deal with that?
Yeah, it's kind of weird. And
I guess it's very inconsistent.
I think it's just done for plot convenience and the fact that some people actually like her. So
she was pretty funny in Shrek 2, but yeah, I think that they needed to tighten up that little plot inconsistency. So now we have Shrek, Donkey, Puss, and Artie walking back to Far, Far Away because their ship crashed. That's when Artie finds out that he's going to be king, and then Artie's afraid that he's not going to know anything about being a king because he's never done royalty before.
Yeah, I was trying to remember. Didn't Shrek lie about him?
Yes, he did lie about it. He said that you're the only heir to the Far, Far Away throne, when in reality, Shrek was the original heir, but he just didn't want the job.
Yeah. So
He wanted to live back into his ogre ways, which I'm actually curious because, Shrek and Fiona did a lot of sacrifices together in order for them to be happy. In the first film, Fiona, she transformed into an ogre. In the second film, Shrek tried to turn into a human so that he can make Fiona happy. And now Shrek doesn't want to be leader of Far, Far Away, even though his father-in-law died. And we even see Fiona saying like, "Hey Shrek, maybe you should stay here and be king." And he's like, "No, I don't want that, Fiona. I want to live my way as an ogre because I'll always be an ogre." So it's like it kind of ruins the plot of the second movie, in which he even though he always sees himself as an ogre, Fiona accepted him for that, but you know it feels like Shrek is afraid of change, that he doesn't want to do things because he's an ogre. He's trying to stick to his ogre ways. It's like he's done major sacrificial changes before, so why couldn't he be a king in this one?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
So then they have this kind of crazy theatrical performance in this, and where he tries to hero, he does like the whole spiel like at the beginning of the film. Now he's going to do this over the top, one where he kills Shrek in front of everybody, and which I thought was kind of weird in a way, and so yeah, it's and I can't even remember most of it as well. Like it's all that as well. Like the animation for this is like it's so samey. Like there's nothing that comes at you that you think oh hey, this is something I've never seen in the Shrek world before.
Yeah, I mean it feels very similar. You're right. There's not a lot of variety in terms of new things. I mean, we have Far, Far Away, we have the high school, we have the forest, we have the castle. There's nothing fresh about this movie. There's nothing surprising.
No, and so it just ends pretty much the same way. Probably Shrek 2 probably ended in that. There was this climactic scene where everything just kind of pulls together, and then all of a sudden we get a music number at the end. Like,
that's true.
It's like it's pretty much Shrek the Third is pretty much evidence that this thing was running out of steam pretty quickly.
Yeah, that's true. And there's a lot of other things that we didn't bring up, but they don't really matter. Like they meet up with Merlin, and he's played by Eric Idle, who's kind of like a zany character, and he tries to help Arthur and Shrek kind of like deal with their issues, like Shrek not wanting to be a father because he's afraid of what he'll do with the kids. And you have this side story in which Arthur is afraid of abandonment because his father left him, and that really doesn't go anywhere because we never find out who the father is, and we never see him, get over that. We see him get over the fear of being a king and, not him being a loser anymore, but never about, his abandonment as, with his fatherhood. I think I remember a long, long time ago, there was this theory going around that Prince Charming was Arthur's father because of their similar hairstyle and their eyes. And I was like, that doesn't really make a lot of sense.
No.
Because Prince Charming, he was mostly focused on trying to get to Fiona. But I could see that if maybe they played around the story a little bit, but anyway, but there's not really much to the story. I mean, there's this one scene in which Donkey and Puss in Boots, their voices swap, and we have this kick-ass scene with the princesses fighting against the villains, and then eventually the climactic play where Shrek is being captured, and then there's like this this ambush with Arthur and, him accepting his rule as king. And then Shrek, Fiona, they come back to the swamp, and then they take care of their 3 kids, which we'll discuss about in the Shrek Forever After. And yeah, that's pretty much it. It doesn't really leave a huge impact on a lot of people. I mean, as for like arguments about which is worse, Shrek the Third or Shrek Forever After, I'm sure we'll discuss about it when we get to Shrek Forever After.
Yeah. Fun fact about this film: this was the last film that I saw on VHS.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
So
I don't remember what was the last film I saw on VHS. I don't even remember.
Yeah, so
because I mean, we as soon as DVD came along, we switched to it pretty quickly.
Yeah, I mean, this came around in the dying days of VHS, I think, and so I remember that I mean, at the time, the first time I watched this film was actually on an in-flight movie, and it was such a can't remember what airline it was. It was a pretty wretched one, and so the only way that they had the in-flight entertainment is that, and I saw that the person had to take this really old video recorder, and they had to change the videotapes out, and so when they had to do all the safety information, they had to take one tape out and put the other one in, and then when they did all the in-flight movie entertainment, they had to take the VHS out and put the other videotape in, and so it was that was the very last film I think I've ever seen on VHS. I don't think I've ever seen another one since. So so it was not the film that I would have liked to have said as my swan song for the format, but. So I'm trying to think what the last film I actually saw on DVD was. I think it was actually, tell you what, actually, I'm still watching. Sorry, I do lie about that. I watched the Jungle movie on DVD. So
yeah, because they haven't released a Blu-ray yet.
No, and hey. Okay, so shall we talk about the voice? I mean, we've already kind of brushed on the voice actors.
We can briefly talk about it. I mean, we have the regulars like Mike Myers, Eddie Murphy, Cameron Diaz, Antonio Banderas, Julie Andrews.
Question I want to ask about Mike Myers. Do you think he wasn't as enthusiastic for this film as other ones?
I mean, what else was he doing besides Austin Powers?
Well, because in Shrek, he actually had a lot of input in Shrek because he wanted to change to the Scottish accent that he did, and so he sounded really enthusiastic about the character, and the same about in Shrek 2. When it comes to Shrek 3, he's sort of kind of just playing the character. It doesn't look like he's actually adding anything to it.
Yeah, he was on autopilot for sure.
Yeah, I don't think he was as infused for this film, I don't think, guys. Eddie Murphy's just Eddie Murphy. Cameron Diaz just is Cameron Diaz. And
Antonio Banderas, he plays, his stereotypical character of Puss in Boots just fine. And I think that the reason why it just feels so lackluster is because there's not a lot of meat to it. There's not a lot of interesting things that could make the actors really feel like they're going to empower their roles. I do remember seeing in a Shrek the Third behind the scenes clip, like during the time at which when the movie was coming out, I think it was on Nickelodeon or something that they featured it in, and they were talking about this is going to be like a monumental thing for Shrek because Fiona is going to be pregnant and Shrek's going to find out about his if it's going to be a good father, and then Justin Timberlake's talking about the character of Arthur about trying to change his stereotype from being a loser to being a king. And yeah, I mean, I get the basics of it, but there's not a lot of the intricacies of it compared to the previous two. And this is when Shrek was really popular. He was on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. And, he became like a huge pop culture icon, as mentioned, with all the commercials that were playing at the time. So Shrek was becoming like a huge pop culture icon, very similar to how SpongeBob was for Nickelodeon. So there was a lot riding on Shrek the Third, and it just ended on a really low note. And Shrek Forever After was supposed to kind of fix it, and whether it did well or not, we'll discuss about that later.
Yeah. Interesting question, actually, I was asked recently by somebody, and that is, because we're reviewing DreamWorks films, are we going to... there's actually been another version of Shrek, actually, that's been released called Shrek Retold, which is a bunch of independent animators taking parts of the film and telling it the whole Shrek story from again. So what I'm going to do is for this one, shall we say in the comment section below, shall we ask everybody, do they want us to review Shrek Retold at the very end of Dream Machine?
Yes, please let us know. Do you want us to talk about Shrek, foretold,
retold,
foretold, retold, aftertold, whatever? Yeah. But yeah, do you want us to discuss about it? Yeah, I'm actually curious because we've never discussed about a fan video in any of the podcasts that we've done, like Pixmix or Dream Machine. So yeah, this will be interesting.
Yeah, so I'd just be interested to see if anyone wants us to talk about it, and if they do, then we will, and if they don't, then we'll just let it pass by. So
sure, that's fine.
But that's your dose for Shrek for now, and so until the next Shrek film we talk about, and also, what are we talking about next, actually? I do believe it's going to be the horrible, horrible B movie, I do believe, that we got coming up next.
That our hints were pretty obvious, but yes, next time on Dream Machine, we will be discussing about the meme-tastic B movie. Okay. Oh, God.
So until then, from me, Aaron.
And Patricia.
Take care, and don't forget to be yourself.
Get us out of here.